What is up everyone, it's Saber here and welcome to another Naruto What If you end up liking the video, please consider subscribing. It's free and you can take it back at any time and it really helps me out, and this is my main channel, so if you're interested in what if Naruto was raised by the Joker, or what if Naruto had a shape-shifting bloodline and was insane, go check out my main channel. And if you're interested in what if Naruto was taken at birth by Sephiroth, or what if Naruto had crystal release, go check out my third channel. And with all of the YouTube formalities out of the way, let's get into it. The Wakakure halt, a guard stern-faced said to Naruto with his right hand raised up, "Who are you, and state your business." Naruto couldn't help but smile at the blatant insult to his face that was no different than seeing Konoha's yellow flash walking through the streets of this village and stop him just to ask who he was. Everyone in Wakakure knew his father, they also knew him. The name of Naruto wasn't just spoken in Iwa only, wherever they spoke of the UN they spoke his name. Besides, wasn't he the man who defeated the Ondame Raikage? At least that is what the rumors say. Anyway, this man knew exactly who he was and yet acted like he was some sort of caveman who just crawled out of his bed only to realize that centuries have passed since he last stepped outside. It didn't actually bother him that he was getting this kind of treatment from the people he was helping, not the least he was too happy to be insulted. He merely found it amusing. It was ignorance that made a man act like this, and who was he to judge a man in his own house acting the part that was requested of him? Naruto took off the hat on his head, hanged it loose on his back, and offered a blank smile. Namikaze Naruto, leader of the village hidden in whirlpools. I have a meeting with the unnamed Tsuchikage. His tone was smooth, making words just slide through his lips without a bump. The guard narrowed his eyes, stared at him for a good minute or less, whether he was disappointed that the blonde didn't act all high and mighty. It couldn't be seen. His expression became blank as he regarded the man before him. "I wasn't aware that she was expecting you, nor has a word been given to us to prepare for your visit." He didn't budge, merely kept his stare and didn't move away from the blonde. "That is because the meeting wasn't planned. She doesn't know I'm coming. You can say this is a surprise visit to a fellow leader. I'm sure my dear won't mind my visit." The smooth tone was kept as well. As the blank smile, the man released a snort and let out a disgusted snarl, probably because he just called Kuratsuchi his dear and said fellow leader. Obviously there were some issues with the man, but as far as he was concerned, he hasn't done anything. Why couldn't people just allow the past to be the past? "I'm afraid I can't let you in. Regardless of your power, you can't just waltz into our village and demand a meeting with our leader. You will have to make an appointment first, and if she agrees to meet with you, then will we allow you to enter," the man stated firmly. "Besides, I'm not sure she will be free to see you now. She is quite busy." "Demand waltz?" and Naruto asked. "But I haven't demanded anything, nor have I budged into anything. The fact that we are having this kind of conversation just shows that I've not demanded anything nor forced anything, but actually humbly requesting the permission to enter the village. Don't you think?" "No," the man said with a shrug. "That depends on your interpretation. What you say is how you see things, and what I say is how I see things. I cannot argue with you there, so both of us are right, but that doesn't matter because you're not going to allow me to enter peacefully now, are you?" Naruto cupped his chin for a moment or so. "This is embarrassing. The president of the UN and leader of whirlpools being treated like this. Your titles don't mean anything to us." "Namikaze, to us you're just another S-rank criminal in our bingo books. In fact, I shouldn't even be talking to you right now. I should be apprehending you, but it is out of respect for the work the UN is doing at our borders that we don't do anything." Naruto took a few steps towards the man, a somewhat foxy smile playing on his lips. "I never said my titles mean anything, but it must mean I am doing a good job if the likes of you are even able to see it," he said before placing his hand on the man's forehead. He then walked past the man, who remained frozen. "Stay like that for a while. The effects will wear off soon enough." He didn't take more than 4 steps forward before a squad of Umbu dropped around him. "Has your leader finally taken notice of me, or has she had enough fun at my expense?" Neither one of the Umbu said. "Unfortunately, we cannot allow you to be seen walking in our streets, lest should the villagers riot and desire to stone you." Naruto didn't see that happening but chose not to say anything. "Well, lead the way, Umbu-san," he said politely with a smile. Now that was just annoying, but the Umbu just disappeared with him towards Kuratsuchi's office. The woman had stacks of paper all over her desk and had a really nasty look on her face. She seemed sleep-deprived, though. Naruto helped himself to a chair after the Umbu had disappeared from his sight. "You look busy, really," Kuratsuchi said sarcastically. "What do you want?" Naruto, he was going to let the blantat insult that had just occurred at the gate slide this time. Besides, the man was just expressing himself. Everyone did that every now and then. "You haven't been responding to calls, Kuratsuchi, and I'm still marked as an S-rank criminal in your bingo books. We'd agreed that I would have my picture removed. I haven't had the time to do that, and I had nothing to say to you. When I get the time, I will sort it out. Now, if that is all, you can leave now," the woman said in a dismissive tone. Naruto crossed his legs and made himself comfortable on the chair he sat on. "When things were difficult, you hunted me down, stalked me until you got to me. Now that I have removed Shinji and offered my hand in Rebuilding you no longer have anything to do with me. I feel like you used me. Kuratsuchi, does that surprise you? Not at all. Naruto said. You have made it a point to say that you dislike my guts and will probably take off my head one day. Still, after everything I had thought you would have changed a bit. Nothing has changed, Kuratsuchi said, firmly staring straight into the blonde. He smiled in response. At least you don't feel so much anger at my presence that you have to hold yourself from lunging at me. This time that is at least something to smile about and something I would consider a change. Hooray, I can stand you, but I still don't like you, so can you get on to the business so I can get back to my work? Naruto regarded the woman for a few moments before finally speaking. You're working yourself too hard, Kuratsuchi. If you continue like this you'll collapse. So will the work you're doing. The lesson I've learned through this time is that you can't do everything on your own. Thanks for the wonderful advice, Naruto, but I can handle things on my own now. If you don't get straight to business or stop with the small talk, I will have you kicked out of my village, Kuratsuchi said. Seriously, do you understand what I am saying, Crystal? But you won't do that. You can't afford to do something like that. Not to me, not now at least, and not certainly when the police force is fending off enemies your grandfather created when he was still in charge. Kuratsuchi glanced at the blonde with a sharp look. Now because you are supplying help you think that you own me, and I was starting to think that this kind thing was really true. You're really quick to jump the ship when you see a tail peeking above the water, Kuratsuchi, Naruto said before adding, I never said I own you, nor have I made any unfair demands. I haven't even demanded anything. I've just pointed out that you can't spit on me. Not after all the efforts I went through for you. I was even motivated to remove Shinji because you were crying you when I entered into an agreement, but you won't honor it. You had your reasons for killing Shinji. Don't try to manipulate me by saying you did it for me. I am thankful he was killed, but I don't exactly owe you much. Besides, you're just using this opportunity to make yourself look good to your admirers. You should be happy I'm allowing you to do it while my mouth is shut. No one could deny that what the UN was doing for Iwagakure has won the organization a lot of fans from many nations and some people inside the village. Are you that cynical? Naruto asked, tone a bit sharp, catching Kuratsuchi off guard. I mean, I do things for you from the goodness of my heart and even stand blatant insults from your men, and yet you can't even say thank you or even change that twisted perception you have of me. Is it really difficult to believe that I do this because I'm a good person, or do you just don't want to believe it because it will crush your miserable dreams? Watch how you speak to me. Namikaze, the unnamed Tsuchikage said, I will tolerate your breath before me, but I will not accept insults from you, especially in my office. Naruto sighed, tossed a few thoughts before speaking. You were supposed to speak to you daimyo more than a month ago. Earth isn't a signatory to the UN, so the police force shouldn't be here. They are here because of the side agreement you entered with the UN, but in the coming weeks I'll have to withdraw them. Your contractual agreement ended when Shinji was declared dead. I spoke to him and he said no. Kuratsuchi said is that, and I managed to convince him otherwise, so he gave his seal of approval. I will send the document in the coming days. However, the police force are only given temporary jurisdiction throughout the earth except anywhere near the capital. Should anyone from the force be spotted anywhere near the capital, they will be detained or killed. Should you try to persecute anyone within the land with good relations with the daimyo, your pass will be revoked. Those are the terms, ha? Kuratsuchi nodded. I would follow them to heart if I were you. Not that I care for you anyway, but it wouldn't do well to my conscience if your men are harmed while in the services for my village. Your daimyo must be a really dirty man. The unnamed Tsuchikage merely shrugged in response. Not my problem. Besides, who would want to be persecuted by an organization he isn't part of? And in his own home the daimyo controls this country, and he certainly won't allow anyone to turn it upside down. Looking for rats. Don't you agree that the rats must be held accountable for their wrongs? No one should be above accountability. No one should be above the law. Whose law is it? What gives one man the right to pass judgment on another man? Are you trying to make yourself God? You have this all wrong. Yes, the law started with me, but it was made passable by leaders of nations. No man should try to be a god to others, but the law was created. Everyone who accepted falls under it, even I and all the leaders who agreed upon it. If we create a law and say don't kill, and you kill, I have to bring you before the courts that abide by that law. Would you say it is I who charges, or the courts? The courts are just there to ensure everyone is represented fairly and no one misuses the law. It was the law that judges, not a single person. Your problem is that you can't see the UN and its qualities. You only see the Namikaze who slaughtered your men while she couldn't find fault in his words. Kuratsuchi wasn't prepared to agree with it. Neither can you blame me, though. You killed my men right before my eyes. Yes, I can blame you for not understanding your own actions. I told you already. What did you think was going to happen when you marched into the borders of Amagakure? Don't try to fight a war when you don't understand the consequences. In war you lose something, win something. If you aren't prepared to lose anything, don't go to war. Stay home with your children, teaching them what is right and what is wrong. Kuratsuchi glared at the blonde, who returned her glare just as sternly as hers. I will admit that the attack on Amigakure was misguided, but I cannot forget what you did, nor can I forgive it. The anger I felt then was real, and I cannot excuse it. Nobody is disputing your feelings, Naruto said. Answer this question, Kuratsuchi-san. You're a leader. If someone attempted to take over your village, what would you do? If you tell me that you wouldn't fight to kill those who threaten your security, then I will hand over my blade to you in the near future and let you kill me for doing what was wrong. Kuratsuchi had never denied that she would have killed anyone who dared attack her village. It was the natural response of a shinobi. She knew it, but yet couldn't forgive the blonde. Shinobi battles always end in death. I'm trying to change that so that there will be no needless deaths. I created the police force because I knew it was the only way to stop the bloodshed. Your men would have been in battle now, fighting your enemies to death, but the police force has stepped in between. Systematically and tacitly we apprehended your enemies one by one without spilling blood and avoiding meaningless battles she had seen in with her own eyes. It was happening just outside her borders. After all, the police force operated in groups of specialized men who used the seal Naruto had taught them to restrain the criminals. All it needed was just one touch and it was over, battle avoided and no blood being fed to the ground. Our business is done, don't you think? Naruto smiled and stood up. Yes, he said, I will see you soon. Yoname-sama. He vanished in a flash of yellow. Kuratsuchi frowned the moment he disappeared from her sight. What was right and what was wrong? It was laughable that a grown-up woman like her was asking such a question, but Naruto's words begged the question to be asked. The world he was trying to create was admirable, and she liked the idea of settling things without the need to sacrifice her men. Konoha Iruka was rendered completely speechless when Naruto walked into his class. While he was busy with one of his lessons, his students were even amazed at how the Chunin teacher had been so frozen by the arrival of one man. When Naruto had walked out of the village, he'd never thought that the blonde would ever return again, since they no longer kept contact. Admittedly, this made him sad given all the memories he shared with the blonde when he was still his wayward student. According to what he overheard from Tsunade, Naruto had only been awake for about 2 days. After he was put to a week-long sleep, the Chunin hadn't thought that the blonde would be back to traveling around so soon. After everything, he was still happy, so happy that he could cry and start giggling like he was seeing the smile of his crush. Don't be freaked out like that, Iruka-sensei, Naruto said with a smile. You look like you've seen a scary ghost. I know it has been long, but it isn't that much of a shock that I have appeared before you. Iruka blinked once before regaining his composure a bit quickly before he loses his dignity before his students. Sorry, he said a bit quickly. It has just been so long since you came here or even talked to me. Considering how busy you have been, I didn't think that you would come here. Why not? Naruto asked, taking a sit on Iruka's desk. Body faced the class, while his head was turned to face the teacher. You're a friend. After all, that felt like he had been injected with a liquid of awakening that worked magical wonders to display all the fun times and bad times he had with Naruto. Yes, they were good towards each other when they got to know each other well. He acted like a parent to Naruto, but it was still pleasing to know that the blonde still considered him a friend and still had the time to check up on him. I'm glad you still think that way, Iruka said with a warm smile. Let me introduce you to my students. You have no problem with that, don't you? Naruto shook his head. Not at all, he said, before adding, I'd like to meet the new generation of Konoha's academy students. Clearing his throat, Iruka looked at his quiet class with a broad smile. Class, I'm sure many of you already have heard of Namikaze Naruto, and those of you are repeating this grade. His eyes looked at someone in particular. Met him last year in this very same class. This is Naruto, a former student of mine and Jonin of Konoha, leader of the village hidden in whirlpools and founder as well as president of the UN. Most of you know more of the UN's police force that was founded by him as well. Did I mention that he was the top candidate to be the Rokudaime Hokage? Obvious to anyone listening, Iruka was really proud of what his former student had become. The class had never heard the Chunin speak so proudly of anyone. Not even their own genius was spoken about in such a manner by the Chunin. The gleam in his eyes completely eradicated any thought that he might be faking things, and the fact that Iruka also taught Naruto. The Naruto was appealing enough to make one of the students say, wow, Iruka-sensei, and I thought you were a dull sensei. I guess I must start respecting you now. Obviously, the kid received an threatening glare that made him shrink back to his seat. As the murmurs started to pick up, Iruka was forced to take action to restore the precious order he so often finds himself losing. Quiet down, that did the trick. If you have something to say, raise up your hand first. A lot of hands were raised up, making it hard for Iruka to pick which one. It really excited him just to see how the students were excited about this unannounced visit from someone famous as Naruto. The reaction was a bit different from the class of last year. Naruto also appeared more relaxed and happy, which made him even happier. He finally picked one, allowing the first question. Why did you leave Konoha? Namikaze-sama, your father's face is in the Hokage monument, and you could have had your face up there too. Another One followed shortly. If you had stayed in Konoha you could have become our Hokage and followed after the Yondaime Hokage. Isn't it like betraying your home to leave to form another village? Iruka would have really liked different questions than those, but he was still smiling inside with how insightful his students were. These were not the kind of questions Naruto would have asked in his days. I left Konoha because I wanted to follow my dream. We all have dreams, and I believe that as long as we live in a free world, and the dreams that we have aren't to oppress other people but to make the world better, then we should follow them. Yes, I could have stayed in Konoha and become Hokage one day, but I wanted to live differently, follow that path I want for myself. I didn't exactly leave to form a new village. I left to rebuild my ancestral home. Before I called myself Namikaze Naruto, I was using my mother's name Uzumaki. You don't know this, but my mother came from the village hidden in whirlpools when she was younger, during the times when the Shodai's wife Uzumaki Minto was still alive. Let me take you through a little history first. The village hidden in whirlpools was the home of the Uzumaki clan, a clan of longevity and masters of Fuinjutsu. They were also blood relatives of the Senju. Technically that makes them relatives of the Uchiha, since the founders of Uchiha and Senju were brothers. When Konoha was founded, the Uzumaki allied with Konoha and they became friends. The orange swirl you see in the Jonin vests is the symbol of the Uzumaki clan. The relationship between whirlpools and Konoha was strengthened when Hashirama married Uzumaki Mito. Years passed and my mother Uzumaki Kushina was brought into this village when Mito was in the deathbed. However, during the Second Shinobi World War, the whirlpools was destroyed by a combined forces of hidden villages. The destruction was complete and only a few remained alive. There were a few Uzumaki who remained scattered across the nations, but they have all passed away, and there is only one full-blooded Uzumaki who is still alive. So you see, I have only returned home where my mother came from to restore that which was destroyed during the Second War. You all want to make your mothers happy. Although I never met mine while she was still alive, I want her to be proud of me in the afterlife for restoring her village. I have not betrayed Konoha but have simply left to rebuild its former ally, an ally that was brought by Konoha's co-founding clan, the Senju clan. Remarkably, all the students had listened well to Naruto's lengthy history. Iruka envied the blonde. He could never get his students so attentive when teaching history. Naruto was always able to get your attention. You may hate him and think of snapping his neck or just murder him with your eyes, but he always got your attention. Your mother will surely be happy with what you did for her clan, a girl said, smiling warmly. Thuf, I think Yondaime-sama will be a little jealous that you chose your mother instead of him. Naruto chuckled. Well, I compensated by using his name. He smiled. Any more questions? My dad works for the police force and he says that they are the coolest, even cooler than shinobi, even though they don't do flashy jutsus. Is that true? Yes, they are. Naruto said, join them when you grow up and you'll see how cool they are. They are not hailed as heroes in their home villages only, but in every land they go to. I know, because couple of months ago I was also part of the military force. You must have been a genius when you were at the academy to have formed something as big as the UN. Iruka snorted with a laugh while Naruto gave a somewhat nervous chuckle, scratching the back of his head. Well, meanwhile Hokage office, while Tsunade frowned at the thought of Naruto heading straight to Iruka after dropping off his friends, she still smiled while watching him along with Jiraiya through the sand names. Old magical crystal ball, it feels like it has been years since I last saw him. Smiling like that is because it has been years, Jiraiya said. Look at him, he is way more happier than before. This past month did good to his mind as he had a whole lot of time to reflect upon his life, and I have to say I am proud of him. A bit sad at the same time that his help wasn't needed. It seems like he was never going to fulfill his role as the blonde's godfather. After all, the smile is different from back then. Do you think he was faking it? Jiraiya didn't need to ponder on it for too long. The answer was right in front of him most of the time. Yes, I'm not surprised, Tsunade said with a sigh. What now, Jiraiya? From what Miyuki told you, Sasuke is dead, and we know that most members of the Akatsuki, if not all of the, are dead. Shinji is dead as well, so what is the next move? I don't know for sure, but the troubles have lessened. As for me, I will be probably living in the whirlpools for most of my time as a member of the UN's committee. I don't know if I will remain with the disciplinary committee, but whatever happens I will be forced to move into the whirlpools, Jiraiya said. Tsunade became quiet for a few moments as she digested his words. Jiraiya was not a child that she could tell him what to do. He wasn't that needed in the village given that he's never been always available, but she knew to count on him. If trouble does pop up, it will leave the village a little exposed with Kakashi gone, and if you go as well, now is no longer the time to be saying things like that, Tsunade. We shouldn't be focused on keeping the front of the strongest hidden village. Who do you think is going to attack us? Kumo, Iwa, Kiri, or Suna? None of those villages would do something like that, not when Naruto's presence was within Each of the villages besides being in the whirlpool is no different than being in here. Yuzu has always been a part of Konoha, even their shrine is built within our outskirts. Tsunade conceded Jiraiya's point. I guess you're right, she said. Uzumaki clan, they were the most peace-loving clan during the war-ton era before the shinobi villages were even formed. Even during the wars they still refused to be involved even when they were allied with us. Remarkable, isn't it? Konoha participated in each of the wars, and some may have started because of us, yet they didn't involve themselves, and their relationship with us never suffered, yet they were still destroyed. Yuzu was greatly fortified and they relaxed in their security. Naruto has also fortified the village again, and the whirlpools that surrounded the village are tuned on a symbol of security for the village. Jiraiya added in thought, do you think Naruto chose to build the UN in Yuzu because of its history? The village was first to develop seals that could seal a bijou, but they didn't actively go hunting the tailed beasts because they weren't hungry for power, yet they were still feared and destroyed. Perhaps, Jiraiya said. Yuzu had secluded itself from other nations, but it was still surrounded by all 5 great hidden villages. Back then it was the safest place to live, and the Uzumaki weren't fighters to begin with, but were strong nonetheless. Without even engaging in conflicts with other nations, they were still feared. How much powerful do you think they would have become if they'd abandoned their ways and chose to fight? I guess that is what got them destroyed in the first place. Tsunade said yes, the village could have rivaled the great nations with their chakra chains sealing power. They could have collected more bijus than anyone. Peace endures. The spirit of Uzumaki, the spirit of peace, one would have thought it was destroyed along with them, but Naruto has brought it into life again, Tsunade said with a smile. I'm starting to understand things a little. 2 hours later, come in, Naruto, Tsunade said, welcoming the blonde who was knocking at the door probably for the first time since she took the mantle of Hokage. You look well for someone who was unconscious for 8 days. Less than 48 hours ago I had much needed rest during that time, Naruto said calmly. Tsunade nodded, remained quiet. So did Jiraiya. The former seemed to be living the 4th Shinobi World War in her mind. Sighing, Naruto spoke. Do what you must, he said, so she could clear her inner conflicts. The 5th Hokage didn't debate. She stood up from her chair and walked over Naruto before wrapping her arms around him in a bone-crushing hug, which was returned by the blonde after a few moments of bone-crushing silence. Tsunade spoke in a whisper. I'm sorry, Naruto. A small sad smile plastered across Naruto's lips for a few moments before he responded. So am I? They remained like that for a few more moments before Jiraiya chirped in. What about me? I feel like I'm being left out as the two separate. Naruto shrugged off as he took a sit. Go hug one of your customers, Jiraiya. I'm sure that will get your spirits high. The blonde paused for a moment. But if that isn't enough, I will treat you to a bottle of sake from the land of the toads when you get Yuzu. I know the toads haven't been giving you any in a while. While Jiraiya was persistently dancing, Tsunade narrowed her eyes at Naruto. Aren't you forgetting something, Gaki? That is Uzukage-sama. Hokage-sama, Naruto said with a smile. Naturally, I will send you a drop. Bachan, what you suggesting? Uzukage-sama, are you saying all I need is a drop to get drunk? Naruto put up his hands in a defensive manner. I would never suggest anything like that, Hokage-sama. You have been drinking for years, surely you can handle a mere drop. Pervert, Tsunade said, looking at Jiraiya. The Gaki thinks I can't hold my liquor. Should we teach him a lesson? After a few pleasantries were exchanged, possibly for the first time in years, the three returned to more pressing matters that needed to be settled. It was just for old time's sake that they had taken the comfortable route before going on to serious matters that were at hand. Jiraiya mentioned something about the restructuring of the UN. What brought this on? Tsunade asked. Naruto raised his index finger. A smile that annoyed Tsunade played on his lips for a few moments before he responded. You're not an executive of the UN, Hokage-sama, so I'm afraid that level of information is just above your pay. Jiraiya, I would appreciate if you minded that when having your delightful talks with her it was both said purposefully just to annoy Tsundade, and at the same time it was the truth. The restructuring of the UN wasn't something that non-executive members were to know, and Jiraiya only knew despite being a member of the DC because he was his advisor. The reform concerned those in the UNCC and the Supreme Court, which decided whether it was lawful or not. Proper channels had to be followed in everything, and as one who formed the basics of the law, Naruto followed it to heart. You're playing this card now, are you? She remember saying something like this to many people. It wasn't because they were not trusted, but it was simply because it was just above them, and when following the right protocol, if it was beyond them, she didn't have to tell them. Yes, you like doing it so many times, and besides, what would be the meaning of rules if we only apply them when it suits us? Naruto responded calmly. He knew Tsunade often did something like that, follow rules when it suited her, but he didn't judge her. Most of Konoha's rules were flawed to begin with, steering away the conversation from its current path. Jiraiya looked at Naruto with a calm look. How are you dealing things with Iwagakure? Their inclusion as beneficiaries to the UN's resources sparked quite the debate. He knew the blonde had only waken up not long ago, but Naruto was a workaholic. Surely he was trying to cover things up, not that Gaara wasn't covering up things. I was just there this morning. Naruto said the first thing he had done when he woke up was prepare for his visit to the Earth country as matters needed to be put right. I've changed nothing in the agreement I formed with her, or a few tweaks, Gaara added, but my debate with her was rather fruitful. Oh, you trying to get your hands on the yon-named Hokage too? Jiraiya asked with a grin. No, not at all. Even if I tried, I would only succeed in getting my hands caught. Well, at this time anyway, soon enough she will be smiling in my office at Yuzu. It may take years, months, but it will happen, the blonde said confidently. Tsunade shook her head. You're not becoming a pervert like Jiraiya, are you, Naruto? Because I swear if I'll beat you up to the inch of your life. The fifth sounded way too serious that it was almost scary just thinking of what she might do if he said yes. Smiling, Naruto asked her, not at all, Bachan. I'm not an indecent man like your former teammate. Good, keep it that way. Returning the car to the road, Jiraiya spoke. You sound confident that you can manage to get Kurosuchi change her thought of you. Well, I'm rather confident with my persuasive abilities. I'll admit getting her to join the UN will be more of a mountain for now. She can stop her hatred towards me, but convincing her to be part of the UN will be so difficult that it will make convincing Tsunade to return to this village look like a practical drill. Tsunade narrowed her eyes. Are you saying I'm easy? No, but my words do imply that, is answered, offered no relief to the stare of the Godame Hokage. When are you going to ratify your membership to the UN? Tsunade's response came quick. In the next assembly, she said. I'd already discussed it with Gaara. Wonderful, Naruto said. Can you permit Shizen to stay a little while longer? And Yuzu, I really need her. Tsunade sighed. Naruto, you're taking everything from me. You may have left Konoha. You're starting to strip the village of all its valuables. Naruto cupped his chin, appearing thoughtful. I guess I am unintentionally, he said. Well, I guess I will be taking my leave. Thank you for bringing them to me. It really helped, the blonde said, smiling before disappearing. I was going to ask him to have lunch with us. Tsunade mumbled a bit disappointedly. You do know that lunchtime has already passed, right? So I haven't eaten. Kirigakure, President May said, acknowledging the blonde's presence. He'd just appeared in her house. Well, every of her guards knew of his special pass. He didn't have much trouble in having access to her place when without her knowledge. It's good to see you alive and well, she said with a smile. The Godame Hokage had only returned from work not too long ago. It wasn't dark, but sun's back could still be seen in the west mountains surrounding the beautiful land surrounded by the sea. She just knocked off early because she wanted to relax, and besides, since the village had recovered from its wars and managing to stay afloat without anyone holding its hand, she could afford to take some time out. Naruto's presence made her happier at her choice. It was no different than just getting the wish of the day. First, she takes times off to rest on an otherwise huge and cold, lonely house that she so often resents for the sadness it brings, but the walls, who were ready to watch her misery, were now left disappointed. As her president had shown up between the two of them, they could keep the walls awake all night, and then they will have something to glare about. Before Naruto could respond, as he took a sit beside Mei on her couch, the red-haired woman spoke again. This time she left a question. You're alright, Mei? Naruto offered the woman a warm smile. Pretty much, yeah, he said. He's never been more happier. If anyone else wasn't convinced that he was okay with that response, I'm well, both physically and mentally, the blonde added to make things clear for Mei, as those were the two areas of concern. Good, as though she had been holding her breath, Mei let out a long breath of relief and smiled once more. I'm glad you are well. Sorry I wasn't by your side more often than I should have, considering that things had gone down just outside of her village. She believed she should have been with him for more days than she did. There's no need to apologize, Mei, Naruto said warmly. Temari tells me that you spent 2 days, and that is enough for me. You have your village to lead. Besides, the 48 hours you spent by my side were more than the hours Miyuki spent. He didn't sound sad or disappointed by the fact. Mei tried piercing through his gaze to see if he was wearing a mask, but there was nothing. He understood her country was being led by her uncle, whom she has no relations with whatsoever, and on the outside appears more powerful than her. I was shocked really when I was informed that in less than 3 days she'd already removed him from office along with all his goons and hired guards, without a civil war or any reported battles breaking out. Mei said her trusted intel suggested that the uncle had not been willing to relinquish power to the returned daimyo. The hired guards had been brought in to ensure that she didn't return, but in less than 3 days the man had removed all his belongings from the palace and then completely vanished from sight. No one really knows what happened, but the results were clearly visible to everyone who looked. Did it surprise you when you were told, or did you have something to do with it? Mei added with a question to the blonde on her right side. Honestly, yes, I was surprised when I was told. Perhaps sure had something to do with it. He hasn't been responding to any of my summons. Ultimately, his response implied that he didn't have anything to do with it. It just confirms that Miyuki is really resourceful. Ever wondered how at her young age, seemingly powerless, was able to gain control over the Wind Country in the first place? There were more suitable candidates than her. Yes, her father wanted her to lead, but she wasn't the most suitable, yet she reigned supreme. I suppose you know why. Naruto shook His head, "It's all a mystery to me," he said. "Let us not speak about her further. I don't want to ruin my mind." May was silent for a few moments. It didn't need a second guess for her to safely assume that things were still rock bottom between the pair, but that she wasn't complying as it gave her a chance. "Have you heard from Princess Koyoki? Considering how attached to you she seemed, I'd assumed she would come to see you, but as far as I know she didn't show and doesn't respond to any message sent to her." Again Naruto shook his head, but this time he added a frown. "No, I haven't actually had a conversation with her in months. She refuses to speak to me for rejecting her and forcing her into escalation." "Why did you do that anyway? That woman really cared for you, and you seemed to like her as well." Though she wouldn't tell him, his actions towards the princess had been rather cold. Everyone could agree with her on the notion. Naruto waved his right hand dismissively. "A matter of another day," he said a bit strongly. "I really wish I was here on a personal visit, but that isn't the case. Things with the Mizukage were always fun." He had never been bored with his life, and all his visits to her. May always had the right meds to keep you up, and the kind of laughter that makes you just want to stare as the ears absorb the melodious sound of her voice. A pity he wasn't going to have any of that, not at this time anyway. "Well, we can still make it personal after the business is out of the table," May said with a smile. She couldn't keep it for too long as Naruto shook his head. "Unfortunately, I can't do that. I want to, but I have guests to attend back at home. Temari is likely going to go berserk when she sees me for leaving her with my work while I slide through the joyride. Others are already gathering for the Executive Congress. No, you're all scheduled to be in Yuzu in a week's time. It is just Gaara and a friend Fu and Utakata should arrive tonight as well. I wish to gather all 9 Jinchurikis in one place. I have tracked down Iwa's Jinchurikis, but they are rather difficult people." May's curious brow arched at his revelation. "Do you know such a meeting will shake the very foundations of the elemental nations? If it leaks out, all of you gathering is a major threat that is greater than anything the world has ever seen. Some Wayward's minds will be thinking that the UN is just a stepping stone. Your Jinchuriki retribution, I know, but it must be done." Naruto said, "I require your blessing in using Kirigakure as a meeting place. Should talks be fruitful, we shall continue to have our secret meetings under your protection." May sighed. "You know I can't say no," she said. "But why, Kiri? I think it is the perfect place for the Jinchuriki revolution to start, given its bloody history amongst the normal and those blessed with special powers." "When will the meeting take place between the Executive Congress and the Emergency Assembly?" Naruto said, standing up. "I will confirm dates with you after we meet for the EC." He bent down before placing a soft kiss on May's forehead. "I'll see you soon, May. Can't you just send a clone to welcome Gaara?" May said, not wanting him to leave. "Tempting, but I can't do that." He offered her one more smile before vanishing in a flash of yellow. Suddenly the silence in the house began to swallow the Mizukage in loneliness. There was no one with her, no one to speak to, no one to amuse her. As she rids of the boredom, the spirits that were lifted when Naruto appeared were no wiping the floor with their faces. Why did she even return early? At least in the office she would have buried herself at work. Letting out a long sigh, May stood up, heading towards her bathroom. She could kill some time by taking a really long bath, or even doze off in the water. "Wind Capital, what do you want?" Miyuki's stern voice demanded after a man wearing a red mask appeared into her private quarters without a warning. "I thought I told Naruto that I needed some time to think. Wasn't I loud enough for him, or just he not know when to stop pestering?" She could recognize Naruto's men without even their masks, and knew them by scent, not literally. Of course, the man that was making himself comfortable on her desk was the one she assumed controlled Naruto's intelligence gathering, mainly for Yuzu and the blonde's own personal affairs. Sure had been dealing most with the UN amongst other things. According to Naruto, he'd given one of the man wearing red masks command over his clones that specialized in information gathering. She could never figure out which one, as they all appeared to be the same. Still, her report said this man was the top dog in Naruto's own spy network, but the man who handed her the report could never be sure since things were fairly hidden. The man who wore red masks were about 5 less or more, and neither knew each other's faces. The only one who knew them was Naruto himself. Her report further suggested that these men were trained by Danzo in espionage, but she could never prove it. The message was clear, the man said in a monotone voice that said, "I'm not here on Naruto-sama's orders. If Naruto didn't send you, then leave. I have nothing to discuss with you, and as you can see, I have matters to deal with." She was referring to the stacks of papers that were in front of her on her desk. Her foolish uncle had screwed up a lot of things in a short period of time, so she had to put them together in the way they were before his filthy hands touched them. "Don't be so cold, Daimyo-sama. We are technically acquaintances, after all," the masked man said in a mild tone. "Do you know that when you started your tenure as Wind Lord, Naruto-sama was making preparations for the UN to be formed?" "What does that have to do with anything?" Nothing at all. I was just making small talk to ease the pressure in the room, but it doesn't seem like it helped." The man paused for a moment, cocked his head to the right for a few moments, as he studied Miyuki like a curious piece of a puzzle. Not so long after Your coincidental meeting with Naruto-sama. You went to the Kazekage and discussed the potentials of an association with the son of Konoha's Yellow Flash. Furthermore, you invited him to a banquet as your date. Mind you, all important businessmen from the Wind were present as well as other rich folks from the outside. Naruto even gave an inspiring speech. In the end, things happen like that and then some. That is, if my memory still serves me well. Miyuki simply said, "Are you taking this somewhere? Tell me, Daimyo-sama. Why did Shinji decide to kill you? We can't speak of Sasuke as he wasn't the one calling the shots. You're just a normal civilian. What threat did you pose to him? He wasn't that of sadist to kill you just to see the look on Naruto's face or just to do it so to make the blonde see the way. I can't exactly tell the answer to that question, but I do assume that if there were any other reasons he would have told Naruto about it." The mask shook his head. Not unless he didn't want Naruto to know and had merely called him just to put the blame of your death in him, as he was interested in seeing the Uzukage wallow in depression just so he could put a halt to his plans. Well, killing you should have two problems for him, so Shinji had another reason for killing me. Miyuki said. Naruto didn't suggest anything of that nature. He blamed himself for what had happened to her, nor did he say it may have been my fault. That is because he trusts both of you, the masked shinobi said. Yet even when it wasn't entirely his fault, despite Shinji painting it that way, you didn't attempt to remedy things. I do wonder if he is just playing the part or ignoring the facts. He finished in thought. Playing the part? The masked shinobi didn't exactly answer the question. There is very little that is spoken regarding Naruto-sama that he doesn't know. It may take weeks, but eventually this meeting will reach his ears. Pausing for a moment, he added, "The dark feathered creatures are always watching after all, but don't worry, as long as Naruto-sama trusts, he won't question like he always does." Whirlpools. As soon Naruto walked into his living room, he was greeted by a cold and frightening stare from Temari. The woman had her hands resting on her waist, eyes unblinking as she regarded his presence. The blonde couldn't quite finger what he might have done to set off her wrath. Yes, he'd been gone for all day handling other matters, but he hadn't done anything that would piss her off. She couldn't be angry about yesterday. Could she know? How nice of you to finally decide to return. Temari started in a quiet tone. "I hope you did have your fun and solved all matters during your time away. As for me, on the other hand, I had a lovely time running your village and having to bite my lip so many times when your children cried and demanded to see you." Naruto smiled nervously, scratching the back of his head. "Sorry," he said. "I wanted to see everyone today so that I could begin work tomorrow. I should have told you something, but you didn't and let me do your work while you're perfectly fine to handle it. Do you know how hard it is handling brats? They are annoying, never shut up, and are downright frustrating." Considering how short-tempered Temari was, Naruto couldn't deny that she would find it difficult handling needy brats, especially the ones who could call themselves his children. "Tell you what, I will make it up to you by doing whatever you want me to, if it is acceptable." That is, Temari considered his response for a few moments. Her temper took a rest and she smiled, a bit of a nasty smile. "Oh, you'd go that far?" she said. "Well, as long as you're willing." She never got to finish as Naruto raised his right hand. Naturally, it didn't bode well with Temari that he had the audacity to interrupt her like that. "Our guests have arrived," the blonde said a bit happily. "Guests?" Temari repeated. "I thought we were only expecting one guest." Naruto merely smiled. "Come on, love, let us go to greet our guests," the blonde said happily, holding out his right hand. Temari took 2 steps forward before she halted when the words truly sinked in. Naruto had just called her love, and that made her feel a few twitches inside. She narrowed her eyes at the blonde dangerously. "Don't call me that," she said firmly. Naruto just waved her off. "If I had accepted Gaara's proposal, the first one, we would be married already, and you'd probably be knocked up expecting hopefully a boy. I already have a girl." The last words were said in a whisper, but Temari heard him. She just didn't take much of it, as she assumed he was talking about someone from the orphanage. "Knocked up me by you? Can you even do that?" Temari asked, stepping closer to the blonde. "Yes, wanna test that?" Temari snorted and pushed the blonde aside. "In your pitiful dreams," she said, walking over to the door where her beloved brother was lying in wait for her. Her march towards the door was halted as she snapped her neck, turning towards her fellow blonde, who was right behind her. "Don't make me repeat myself, Naruto." That said, she went ahead. Gaara. Temari looked at her brother questionably, because on his right hand was a woman she had never seen before. Temari was a confident woman and didn't fuss much over by looks, but when looking at the woman she couldn't help but feel threatened. "She is beautiful, isn't she?" Naruto asked. Taking Makoto's hand, he planted a soft kiss on the back of her hand before speaking again. "I can never get quite enough of you, and certainly I could go further than just the hand," he said to the black-haired woman with a sly smile on his face. Returning the smile, Makoto responded, "Well, you had your chance when father threw me into your room and said you were free to do whatever you wanted. If you had played your charms right, my legs wouldn't have been kept crossed. I will forever regret not taking the opportunity when it represented itself, though I do wish another represents itself soon enough. This time I will surely Grasp it lip to lip, tongue to tongue, and hand to hand. There might an open window, Makoto said, a bit of glint in her eyes, but that depends on certain factors. What are those factors? I'd even willing to throw Gaara and Temari out for you. Makoto smiled pleasantly, but before she could respond, Gaara cleared his throat while Temari jabbed Naruto on the ribs. Stop, the image you're painting now is giving me unpleasant chills. I see you two are as familiar as she says, despite only being in each other's company for a short time. Gaara said, yes, we are. Naruto said, please come in. Gaara, Makoto-chan, the blonde said, leading the guests towards the sitting room while Temari kept an eye on the black-haired woman. Makoto noted and spoke. Something on your mind, Temari-san? She asked politely. Who are you? Gaara's girlfriend. Naruto responded with a small smirk. What would he is just messing with you, Temari. Gaara said, calming his sister. Makoto and I are just friends. As of now anyway. I'm just a friend, Makoto murmured, and I thought we were more than that. Naruto followed in by pulling Makoto closer to him as they sat together on a couch while Gaara sat alongside his sister. Sit next to me will make him realize just what he is missing, the blonde said. I trust your journey was pleasant. If you consider teleporting from Suna to here a journey, then yes, it was pleasant, Gaara responded quietly. There are a number of access points that Naruto created which all led to the Wave Country. Not everyone had access to them though, but he had one of his own in Sunagakure, which he used to come here without the need to spend hours and days coming here. Gaara's special port took him directly to the village while others had to take a ship after being flung into the wave. The reasons for that were that if he made it differently, no ships will head to Yuzu, and that meant no business for him and for his people. That is good to know, Naruto said. I didn't think you would have made acquaintance with this delightful woman by this time and gotten close enough to actually bring her here with you like a date. It isn't like that, Gaara started quietly. I brought her with me because she was eager to see you. Then there is little progress in the talks for an agreement. Well, I should have expected this from Sabaku no Gaara. Naruto sighed. He looked at Makoto for a moment before looking back at the Kazekage. How do you like it? A barely noticeable frown settled on Gaara for a second. Is everything true? In war were you doing so far from our map? The facts are true. Her father is a somewhat greedy man, which is why a civil war nearly broke out in the first place. Didn't she tell you he's already sold 3 of her elder sisters and 2 younger ones? The only son was sold to a queen of some country. Naruto responded to Gaara's question. I was there because her older sister had requested for my help. I'd assumed it wasn't a coincidence that you were around her nation when things were getting interesting, Gaara said before adding, she doesn't seem to know you were asked to help though, he said, referring to the surprised Makoto. I didn't tell her, Naruto said with a sad smile. I do admit I hadn't anticipated her father to offer her to me when he'd learned of my identity. It explained why he pushed her towards Gaara. Aang told me she wanted to be freed from her shackles. She's already been forced to birth 1 child and more will follow soon. If nothing is done, she doesn't want to spend the rest of her life raising children of a man she doesn't love. Her younger sisters have only been married recently, all still holding out their innocence, but as the days pile up it is getting harder. Aang is the older sibling. She knows what it feels like to share a bed with a man she would rather kill than sleep with. Naturally she wants her sisters to be saved before it is too late. Why did you save her father then? I didn't save him, I saved the kingdom, Naruto said. I've made preparations. What is left is for me to convince King Haba to retrieve all his children. Naturally that will create a backlash from the husbands. I have things under control. Nonetheless, Makoto's father will only be willing to join the UN if his daughter is married. A rare smile went across Gaara's face. You're not a nice person, Naruto, he said. You know, should he join the UN, the law will apply and you will do whatever you want. It will be easy for Makoto's sisters to return home as they will be protected by the law of the UN. Even if her father decides to quit, it won't change much as the law has already been applied. Will someone tell me what the hell is going on here? Temari snapped. Well, Naruto started, there's everything you've heard so far, and that I have put an offer for Gaara. Marry the delightful Makoto-chan. Is this true? Gaara, he nodded. Why would you do something like that to my brother? Just returning the favor. He did try to set me up with you, remember? Naruto grinned. Besides, Makoto can be my mistress while married to Gaara. If he doesn't want anything to do with her, I can supply all her physical needs. You're disgusting, Naruto, Temari said distastefully. I so knew you were going to say that. You can't take a joke, can you? That wasn't funny, you're just stiff. And Naruto is just being mean to Gaara because she didn't say because what? Oh, nothing. As the women stared at each other, Naruto looked at Gaara. So how is it being president? Time skip Assembly Hall. There are only 3,266 officers in the police force, 1,200 of which was only added to the force's 3 weeks ago. Out of that 250 were coming from Kumogakure and 495 coming from Amagakure. This brings a total of 725 men from Amagakure and 350 from Kumogakure. We also received 700 men from Sunagakure, 525 from Kirigakure and 650 from Konoha. I have managed to recruit over 125 to the police force, which brings a total of 3,075. This amount is only coming from Konoha, Sunagakure, Kumogakure, Amagakure, Kiri, country, and Yuzu our other members have only contributed a combined number of 191, which is quite honestly pathetic. Over 3 months ago I was forced to create 1,000 clones on a daily basis because of the lack of personnel in the police force. It was rather taxing to my mind as all the clones had to do the rounds the UNPF do on a daily basis. I have made calls for more shinobi to be transferred into the UNPF, but there are many nations who have chosen to disregard that call. Such carelessness will be dealt with. We cannot go like this. Everything was agreed upon, and anyone who didn't agree with anything passed was given the opportunity to make their opinions known. The 3226 men in the police force are spread across all nations, Naruto said, pointing all over the map with nations highlighted in red signifying membership to the UNA. When we break them to small groups they become very few, but they have proved to be effective. Last month only 150 women and children were freed in the Earth country. 102 of those were led to Amagakure, where the UN's homes for the lost were built. 48 were children who are being taken to Yuzu, where they are being educated. Because of the lack of funds, the burden of the people saved by the UNPF is placed on the village in which the homes are built. Amagakure is not the only village where we built temporary homes. There are 500 houses built just beside the Valley of End in the Fire Country. Because of the location, the place is constantly watched by members of the UNPF. 210 of the houses are occupied, and it is the UN's responsibility to ensure that those people are fed on a daily basis. We have also arrested hundreds of criminals, many of which have already been put to prison. Some are still being tried. There is also budget issues with regards to the criminals, as they must also be fed. Lastly, with regards to the UNPF, the 3,226 men are paid monthly salaries for their work by the UN, as they are no longer available to take missions from their village. They make their living through payment from the organization which employs them. Naturally, payments are made based on rank of the official. Naruto stated the meeting had started some minutes ago and he was busy laying out his reports as president and some of the problems that the organization was facing. These issues needed to be solved or there would never be progress. The issue of funding was an important one, as without it could mean the end of the police force and many other operations of the UN. Leaders of different nations, plus the second in commands, were sitting in the chairs as Naruto was alone. In the center stage, a large map hanged on the wall just behind him. None of them could deny that the police force had been highly successful since its first operations. The problem has always been lack of support from nations, though even they could see that the UNPF was doing well. Not everyone was willing to give it all. Kumogakure has 350 men in the UNPF. Are they planning on joining us? If not, we cannot allow them to continue like this, or they will soon have some influence of the operations of the police force. Tamara said. Tamara-san, Yamagakure has not transferred a single shinobi to the UNDF. Should you be the one to be saying such words? Naruto asked the man, who quickly shut up. This is one of those cases where other nations step up and say, if you won't do it, we will. Don't complain about it. If you followed upon our agreement, we wouldn't even be talking about this. President Uzumaki, the Lord of Rivers, started. I'm concerned by the number of forces spread across the Fire Country compared to other nations. The country has a huge number of forces operating within it. Can you explain why the forces are spread based on missions assigned? But what explains the high number of forces within the Fire Country is that there are camps around the country formed by the UN as temporary shelters for those in need of them. Other camps hold bandits who are waiting to be led. The police force courts. How are you doing to deal with the villages who are not abiding by our agreements? You said they would be dealt with. Then how are you going to do that? Naruto took his time before responding. Small nations have taken comfort in the presence of the police force around their borders, yet they've refused to send their own men into the force. I have spoken to each leader about this, but nothing concrete was decided. The UNCC has decided that within 2 weeks our forces will be removed from any village or country that has not complied with the agreement. The words were received by a clap by someone who actually agreed with the decision, while others were completely taken off guard by the idea. They all knew Naruto was ruthless sometimes when he had to execute the laws of the UN, but they hadn't thought that he would do that far. That is not all. We may be a peace organization, but there is a way in which we do things, and those who don't want to comply with our agreements will have to face the music. The removal of the UNPF in your nations means that it will no longer work for the safety of your nations, but for those who wanted to put it simply, if you don't start complying with the UNPF you will be written off. You can't do that. One of the leaders shouted. I can't and will. Naruto said firmly. I told each of you who have yet to comply that I would take measures should you fail to follow others' lead. Where is the peace in that? There is no peace. This is administration and done in the name of fairness. When was the police force formed? Last year. The villages who have yet to follow on the Agreement haven't because they don't have the numbers, it is simply because they don't want to. We request guns from them to kill a beast terrorizing the land, they refuse and yet expect us to protect them. No, things will not work like that. We know that villages aren't equal, but we have said you can give what you can give. We agreed that each village would give what it could and you all agreed upon this, yet the very people who agreed don't act according to the agreement simply because they chose not to abide, not because they can't. The wave doesn't have shinobi. We were fair to it and told them to transfer funds to make up for that gap. We were fair to everyone. It is you who haven't been fair. You broke our agreement purposefully and none of you can stand up say I didn't come to you about it. It is this purposeful actions that undermines our agreements that we must root out. Tell me, if you are able to undermine an agreement you made amongst others, what stops you from undermining other agreements? Some tense silence settled in the hall as Naruto received some looks, but the blonde merely shrugged them all. It was a little rule that if you do share we won't give you what others have collected. It wasn't like they weren't sharing because they didn't have anything. They had fish in their hooks but just didn't want to give it up for the whole crew. It would have been bad for Tazuna's country if they had also been required to transfer some men to the UNPF. The wave depended on other villages for protection. Naturally it had to pay for that protection. The agreement they made was different as they didn't have any shinobi funds, even the field, and ensured that they received a global protection from the UN. Seeing that no one was about to say anything, Naruto continued with his report. I said in the beginning that we were experiencing a shortage of funds. There are a lot of dishonest people in this hall. Over the last year, the UN built a lot of buildings around the Oriental nations, ranging from camps, police force offices, prisons, amongst other things, all of which were paid for by me, Sunagakure, Aim and Kiri, and mostly billed by me. The three villages combined brought out a total of 250 million, which I have been using to pay the men in the UNDF. Their money has also been used to purchase food for those displaced by bandits and without homes. Criminals arrested have also been fed using the money, and we coughed up to 55 million to the work we did in Iwagakure. The police force require not less than 15 million to run every month. Sometimes it can even go up to 25, like in December when operations were higher, and in January where we used a whooping 35, mostly because the numbers increased. Projected cost for salaries and other expenses are to cost at between 14 to 20 million per month. That is for the UNPF only. Food supply for the displaced in our camps, prisons, as well as pay for the peacekeepers and prison personnel makes up roughly 7 million per month. I have 250 academy students living in the whirlpools, of which must also be fed by the UN. The total number of students in the academy registered for our program is 2,500, but because of space and lack of trained teachers we were forced to accommodate the 250. However, by June the number will increase by 1,250 to 1,500. We have been building a bigger academy. Another academy which will accommodate 1,000 students will be built in Yuzu. Preparations have been made. The academy is to be a specialized institution which will focus on medical ninjutsu and Fuinjutsu. That said, by end year all 2,500 students will be accommodated and trained for the next 2.5 years. Upon graduation they will either join the UNDF Sealing Corps or the medical division. The latter two have yet to have their own HQs, but hopefully by end next year things will be built. The UN's medical div will have its own world-class hospital, and the Rivers foundations for the hospital have already been laid. We have also embarked on a developmental program that seeks to help poor nations. Naturally that requires a lot of money. The UNA gathered a pitiful 300 million for this program, of which 200 should be spent by end July. The UN received 550 mil from its core members, while I contributed 300 million. I have also been promised to receive donations worth 600 million from various businessmen before end year. 500 million of the 550 has already been allocated to various departments. As I speak, the UN's bank account has a favorable balance of 50 million. Naruto paused to allow his audience to digest all the words he'd said. After a few moments he continued speaking. Funding continues to be the problem. Treasury projects that if we are to carry out all that is needed for the UN, we needed a year budget of around 1 billion a year for the next 3 years. Since the UN is still young, 1 billion. Do you hear yourself, President? That is triple the budget I receive from my village. Murmurs broke out at the mention of 1 billion. Naruto let them play for a minute or so before silencing them. I didn't say I wanted 1 billion from you people. May almost burst out laughing at the looks Naruto's statement brought out from the people, who found the amount to be outrageous. Obviously no one was going to agree to raise that kind of amount. Still, the millions being spoken of and the transactions that were going to take place meant that there was surely going to be some corruption lurking in the shadows. But she trusted that Naruto would handle things. What do you mean by that? Most of you have not taken part in any of the UN's operation. The police force receives support the most, but other departments receive no support at all. For this reason we have decided not to count on you for the operations. You care little. For this means that we will not ask for permission to do certain things, but we will inform you. Just in the case of IWA there shouldn't have been a debate about the issue, nor when Kumo decided to send its help. Until you choose to reorganize your thinking, the UN will handle its business and you will handle the UNA's matters. The 1 billion will be funded in this manner. I have signed agreements with good people who have pledged to donate 375 million per year for the next 5 years. I have ventured into business that will see proceeds of around 100 million per year. Those proceeds will be directed to the UN. Both Wind and Fire Daimyo have agreed to each donate 65 million per year. This excludes other contributions they will have to make. Suna, Aim, Carry, Wave, and Konoha have agreed to make a combined total of 380 million. The rest of you will contribute the 5 to 10 million that was agreed upon last year. Do you have complaints about that? No doubt that was asked purposefully, and some of the words had just been said to make them understand and know that even if didn't contribute, operations will still continue. It was no different than being told that we will not beg, and if you don't want to don't, nobody will force you, but when we do our things you won't take any part of it. Won't that give these villages some influence over operations? No. Can you prove it? How? Naruto asked blankly. No response. Any other questions regarding funding? What will happen to those villages who don't follow through with the funding? Section 5 of Chapter 2 in the UN's charter. That was the answer Naruto gave. If you read the charter you knew exactly what happens. Naruto didn't have to say it like it was an answer, he just thought of in the moment. Naruto continued with the report. Seeing no more questions were being referred to him from January. Since now we've received new members for the UNA and Nadeshiko Yukigakure bears, keys, vegetables, birds, and noodles. The village hidden in leaves has also become a full member of the UN. Whirlpools has joined the UNA. Naruto took some time as he shuffled the papers in front of him. The minutes flying by were enough for his audience to digest everything that has been said since the meeting began. There were still going to be much talks and a debate voting to be done. During the time we've been in operation we have seen the destruction of 30 of Orochimaru's bases and the freeing of over 150 people from those hideouts. Recently Konan, the leader of Amigakure, also managed to take care of the snake Sannin himself, and I handled Shinji. The latter had been branded an international criminal for the attacks on Takigakure, Kusei, Wasaki, Wind, and Iwagakure. This was done in my absence. I managed to track down the criminal and delivered the punishment that had been decided to be sufficient for a man of his crimes. Those words were accepted by a round of applause, as this was something to applaud and good for the nations and the stability of the elemental nations. It didn't matter if death had been the punishment. Those two were dangerous criminals that needed to be dealt with accordingly. Prison wasn't good enough for them. Death had been the ultimate price for them, and no one was complaining that it had been delivered. This concludes the report. I had now moving on to other matters. Before he could go on, a hand was raised. Naruto allowed for the question to be heard. There has been growing concerns over your positions in the UN. Not only are you the chief of the UN, you're the chair of the Supreme Council, a member of its EC. You also serve in the Judiciary Committee. This is supported by the law you created. You seem to monopolize every leadership position in the UN and offered others to your friends. How are you going to address this? President. All eyes turned on the blonde, who remained calm and quiet for a few moments before he finally responded. I don't see why you're complaining, as what concerns you more is the UNA, which you're all part of and make decisions regarding your nation's security and stability. The UN is just the core body, but doesn't make decisions for the UNA. We focus on our objectives. However, since this is democracy, I have decided to step down from my post as chair of the Supreme Council. You will select the new chair of your liking. Conan has also agreed to step down as chair of the UNA. You will choose a new chair of your liking. However, the UN's leadership will remain the same. It isn't up for discussion. Changes after this will be made in the next 4 years by the Supreme Council. You people even hardly take part in anything that is UN except for the police force. Why are there complaints? Turn to page 6 on the file next to you, and you will see the new structure of both the UN and UNA. UN President Namikaze Naruto, Vice President Sabaku Nogara, Secretary and General Kurihara. UN Supreme Council Chair. Deputy members include all daimyos and leaders of each village with membership status to the UNA and is a statutory to the UN's charter. By virtue of being a chair, the chairs of the Disciplinary Committee and the Judiciary Committee, commander of the police force, gain a seat in the council. The council is the highest council which combines both the UN and the UNA. Its primary mandate is to elect leaders of the UN and the UNA. It is the committee that will elect the president of the UN every 5 years. The council will only gather once every year. UNEC Chair Terumi May. Deputy Sabaku Nogara. Members Kurihara, Namikaze Naruto, Senju Tsunade, Tamara, Konan, Yoshino, Takada the commit is responsible for the running of the UN and its daily operations. They make the executive decisions. Commanders of the police force report only to the Council UNAEC Chair Deputy, Cheyenne members, leaders of membership nations responsible for overseeing. The alliance between the nations allied is fair, as well as attempting to broker peace between allied nations and ensuring that members are good relations exists. Supreme Court remains unchanged. Disciplinary Committee remains unchanged. The committee will be tasked not only with investigating activities in the UN but also in the UNA. As stated before, the committee is Independent Judiciary Council. The council will be an independent body of the UN. It is the council above the Supreme Court and has certain rights over the Disciplinary Committee. National Security Council. The committee will be tasked with seeing that threats ranking above S rank are dealt with recommendations from the Supreme Court. It will also be able to make decisions regarding the security of nations allied in the UNA. The council will have its own force which will handle all matters that threaten the security of allied nations. Elections for the National Security Council, Supreme Council, and the UNAEC will be held in 2 hours after we have taken the needed break. Silence didn't settle, and after Naruto had spoken as another leader rose from his seat. While the UNA governs the treaties, villages sign and maintains healthy relations outside the borders of the nations, but we hardly have any influence in the UN. It is correct that some of us don't take part in many of the UN's activities, but shutting us out isn't going to do it. I understand that the UN only follows through its charter, which we have all agreed upon. That it is fair. I understand your desire to keep things in the way that they are at this time, but we must also be involved, those of us who wish to. Anyway, I cannot disagree nor complain with the current leadership and activities of the UN. It hasn't done anything unlawful and has helped in making our world a better place. However, the UNA plays little part in all that. I suggest that members of the UNA form their own charter or constitution if you like. If the UNA creates its own charter, it will be able to stand on the same footing as the UN. Just as the UN can get involved in our discussions, we must also be allowed to oppose some decisions of the UN should we not like them. A few nods. Welcome the suggestion as Kurihaha stood up. I second the motion. The Supreme Council doesn't offer console and our lack of influence over the UN. The Council's mandate isn't to discuss matters regarding the UN and the UNA. That is left for both organizations. The Council focuses on electing leadership and of both bodies and take control during emergencies like when war threatens to break out. The UN doesn't have a problem with that. I will leave that to the UNAZC. However, the charter must be in line with principles of the UN and must not contradict the UN's charter. Naruto said after a few moments. The UNA must also have the authority to deal with any nation that breaks the alliance and treaties we sign. As we're the ones who make the treaties, we should also be the ones who make the punishments. The UN can only act when requested by the UNA. If you don't like our decision, you can take it up to the Supreme Court. The UN will still be the one to impose sanctions. Nevertheless, they will just be based on the UNA's judgment. More ideas were thrown into the fray so much that Naruto was forced to stop them. The ideas you are throwing right now should be put into ring. Then when you have decided to draw your charter, you will vote on whether to include them or not. However, we of the UN must also be present to reject anything that is against our charter. Should you have complaints about that, you can take it up to the Supreme Court. With that agreed upon, the break was taken. A day later everything was completed and the next sitting would be for forming the UNA's charter. As it appeared, the UN and the A would be two different bodies, but that didn't worry Naruto as it would offer separation of duties. He could focus on maintaining balance and trying to bring all nations under one umbrella while the UNA sweetened things by organizing treaties. As Naruto leaned against the back of his chair, the door swung open as Miyuki walked into the office along with Sabaku no Gaara and his sister. The leadership of the Wind Country had descended down to speak to him. Pleasantries were exchanged before Gaara asked a curious question, something which was bothering him. You said you would deal with the Akatsuki problem and make it disappear. How did you do it, Naruto? That old man seemed hell-bent on your removal. As President Naruto smiled. Well, flashback. President Namake's old man Tamura said as Naruto walked into his office, what do I owe this pleasant visit? He had been expecting the blonde to come to him sooner or later, given all the movements he has been making against the blonde. Of course, undistressed by actions of some people, I fear that someone is trying to destroy the work I founded in attempting to turn my friends against me, Naruto said with an impassive look on his face. Anyone would be distressed if someone was trying to destroy the very things they struggled to create. What does this have to do with me, though? I understand your feelings, the old man said in a quiet tone. Naruto considered his words for a few moments before speaking. I understand that you have some information aimed at discrediting me. You have approached my biggest allies about it, so there is no denying it. The old man regarded the blonde for a few moments, trying to figure out just what kind of a game he may try to play when he couldn't figure out anything. He chose to play it safe. What if it then I was planning on allowing you to make your knowledge public to other UNA members, but I have decided that I can't allow the news to come out, not yet anyway. While I'm not concerned about how it may affect my image, it will horribly affect Conan's in a negative way. Allow you make it sound like you have a choice in it. President Naruto smiled as he responded, that is because I do have a say in the matter. If I don't want you to say it, you won't. Just who do you think I am? Tamara-san, the UN was built on my work. I created it, and it is now what it is because of me. Do you think anyone can oust me? You can buy a few votes, but no one can beat me in a vote. If I so will, I can be president till death. Big words, but can your allies stand in your favor when they learn of this little secret? Mind you, they will start thinking that there may be more secrets involved. You underestimate the bond one share with my allies. You cannot discredit me. Besides, even if I do quit, who do you think will run the UN? You, Gaara. Yes, he can. However, no one can run the UN without my blessings. You have come to understand it, haven't you? I am the UN. The whole organization is in my hands. So are you. I beg to differ. Naruto raised his index finger. When I took the job, I knew there would dirty works that I would have to do. That is why I created counterintelligence, which works really well. See, there is nothing that happens within the UNA that I don't know, and I can manipulate all information to my liking. The blonde paused for a moment. I know how this makes me look, but I don't really care. If there's a need to dirty my hands for peace, then I will. However, dirtying my hands only mean I cannot lead a peaceful world. That is all right. Nevertheless, I had only planned on leading the world into peace. I won't threaten you or anyone else. I'm not that kind of person. However, I will make it impossible for you to say what you want as long as it's purpose is to discredit my authority. Conan is a very important person to me, and I don't want anything that may rob her of the little happiness she has found. This is what is going to happen. Flashback, and let us just say I managed to convince him otherwise, the blonde said, smiling naturally. I handled things in a way that won't lead this organization to have a dark past. Anything controversial can be afforded as it can be handled, but darkness is darkness. You can't put colors to it to beautify it. What did you really do? Naruto Miyuki asked calmly. I said some other things and brought out my own intel regarding that old man's shady activities. When I told him I knew everything that happens under the UNS umbrella, I meant it. Some people don't think their secrets can be found because of the efforts they put through in hiding things. Naruto responded, what do I owe this pleasant visit? We have a proposal. Miyuki started. Gaara tells me that you can no longer hold the displaced because of bandits in Amagakure, and you can't take any more in the whirlpools, as you have taken a number of them and have already opened an orphanage. If you take any more, Yuzu will die as a village. What is the proposal? Sunagakure will be able to take in some people, but you have to build the homes first. I will share the burden of supporting them with Miyuki. Gaara would do this for free, but given your presence here, I assume there are some strings attached, Naruto said, looking straight at Miyuki. Wind lacks refined medical ninjas. You have the connections to help us in that area. That is only a single string, and the rest. Miyuki merely smiled. Come to the Wind Capital in 3 nights' time, 8 p.m. sharp, and on something nice. We will discuss the other strings during dinner, she said before leaving the office. Gaara followed her, leaving Naruto with Temari. Do you think he is still trying to get us hooked? Uncautiously, yes, Temari said. She became nervous a bit when Naruto placed a really weird smile on his lips. Her fellow blonde stood up and walked to the front of his desk. Before twisting her chair towards him, he gently took her right hand and went down on one knee. Temari, will you marry me? Are you high? That is what Temari wanted to ask, but then the door soundlessly opened, revealing the younger Sand sibling standing in the doorway with a rare smile on his face. Well, Temari, Gaara said. Temari glared at her brother before looking straight at Naruto. When she realized he was still holding her hand, she snapped it back and folded both her hands across her bust. Her brother seemed happy. Naruto mouthed, say yes. Temari gave him a look that clearly said why. Naruto offered a foxy smile that clearly told her he was up to no good. A few weeks later, one could never really be free from work these days. With his term as president of the UN in its younger days, he could never be free. There was always something that needed his attention, something that needed to be solved, and he still had his own village, a personal life that needed time and was emotionally draining. As fulfilling as it was, late nights in Yuzu were always cold because of its watery surrounding, but Naruto had grown used to it. His body didn't even suffer that much from cold, as his body constantly generated the heat to fight off the coldness. This was owed much to the Bija resting inside of him. You have given much work away, but there is still much to be done, Mei said, leaning against the back of her chair inside Naruto's office at the Whirlpool Tower. Much of the work these days is owed to the UNAEC, which has been going through some changes. The whole thing has been going through changes, and it requires us to go through all their work. I never thought that the UNA would take such a structure, though the former EC was made of daimyos, kages, and leaders. Well, it still is, but they've decided to make a supreme council formed by daimyos only. I'd suggested the EC be without daimyos, as they can't be two councils that do the same thing. Naruto said they are trying to push us away from it, isn't it? The daimyos gave so much power to the UN by allowing its judicial system to cover their countries. There isn't a part where we can't reach naturally to gain some standing ground. The leaders needed their own order and have now basically shut us out of their alliance. May added, well, the two of us are still in the EC, but that means little, as they've lessened our impact in the UNA because of our standing in the UN. It matters little. Naruto said there are loopholes we can use to challenge things we don't like. There's always that. May said if things continue to be as they are, whirlpools will become the capital of the elemental nations. The best medical academy and Fuinjutsu Academy are founded here. The ninja academy you have here is of high quality. Your students won't leave as genins, but as full-fledged shinobi. The younger generation will be coming here from all corners of the world to study here soon. You're going to accommodate an academy for civilians. Administrators, funds managers need to be trained for the UN. The main HQ of the UN are located here. Naturally, this attracts people to come here. The fact that daimyos will be coming here regularly for their meetings, as Yuzu has become the new neutral nation, replacing the Iron Country, means that it gets more visits and opens doors for business opportunities. While it may not have a lot of people because of its location, security importance to all nations, it makes it a prime environment to build HQs for your business. Yes, Miyuki once said it may not become like a village anymore, more like a business, an educational hub. When those people heard that we were going to have an academy solely for medical ninjutsu and fuinjutsu, they were quick to have registration open, so that they can add more of the younger ones. How is that going? By the way, many nations are going to be disappointed. We have at least 20 nations in the UNA who outside of the elemental nations, and each is trying to send a group of young and old to the village so that they can be trained for nations outside the elemental nations. It is understandable, as this represents a good chance for their forces to be trained in the same way as others, making them comparable to that of other strong nations. Naruto said, well, enough about work. When are you going to leave? In a day or two? What do you have something planned? Maeab, Naruto said, Gaara leaves tomorrow at noon, so there's going to be some time to fool around. Why not use it? May folded her hands across her bust. I'm only going to be a participant if what you have planned is fun. Will you tell me you're going to love it? But then he frowned. Will tell you later. It seems we have company. Jiraiya walked into the office along with Kakashi, Shizen, and Gaara. I hope we're not interrupting anything, the Sannin said with a knowing smile. Can you be more purposeful than this? Jiraiya, Naruto responded with a sigh. What do I owe for this pleasant visit? I thought all of you would be resting by now from all the day's work. Kazekage-sama will be leaving tomorrow. I'm also taking a 3-week-long time out as we have closed the academy for the quarterly holidays. May-sama won't be staying here for too long. You also have plans to leave for the hot springs for a few weeks. That will only leave Jiraiya-sama and Commander-sama. Shizen said. Commander Sama, that is what they call Kakashi in the police force, Jiraiya said with a smile. It annoys the hell out of him, though he doesn't have to hear more of it these days since he no longer spends much time in the field. Though the Sannin finished and thought before he shrugged. I'm thinking of retiring, Kakashi said carelessly. I've worked a lot in the past months, more than anything since I left Umbu years ago. It is time I also quit the police force and return it to Kazekage-sama, since everyone is thinking of resting. I also need to rest. I can't take the position back, Commander. Gaara said blankly. I have a village to run and other things to look at. You mean the lovely princess? Jiraiya said with a grin. Naruto, you have to fix me up with one of her sisters. I would prefer the younger one though. In your dreams, Jiraiya. When are they due to the village anyway? Naruto asked the Kazekage. They were due a few days ago, but the husbands aren't willing to let go. You'll have to fetch them yourself, Gaara said. Naruto sighed. I will deal with it before I head to the hot springs, he said. Since we're going to be separate for a while, I know a good place to relax while you get drunk and stare at young girls. Jiraiya, you'll probably get arrested at the end of the night for harassment, though it will be worth it, Jiraiya said with a shrug. He knew the place Naruto was talking about. He was never allowed to go there since the last time he was there. Things didn't end well, but with the company he was with now, and Naruto smiled, he would be allowed. Academy. A month later. Shinobi are often associated with lack of morals and continued bloodshed in a world the UN is trying to create. We cannot have such occurring. Death shouldn't be something of ordinary in our world. To lose someone is painful and death shouldn't be taken lightly. Shinobi often kill in their missions as killing is part of the job. I have killed and I know what it is like, what it feels like. You're all innocent children before my eyes. Before the law, some of you were genins. Before being admitted to the academy, you were told carrying a headband means being an adult, but once you came here we stripped you of that adulthood. You're all kids and you will be treated as such unless you wish to grow. But to be treated as an adult you have to show maturity, not by a headband but by your attitude. The police force represent a new world order. Yes, they were shinobi, but they no longer live as shinobi anymore. They have thrown away the mask of shinobi and worn a new mask of the police. Soldiers of justice. As soldiers of justice you're supposed to have these essentials. Morals, discipline, and a good sense of what is right and wrong, a love for justice and a strong desire to do that is good in freeing our world from its shackles. The shinobi mind has to be taken off. As members of the police force, you will not be forced to kill, carry weapons of destruction, and use your jutsus to harm other people. The ninjutsu that we will teach you will be used to build, not as weapons of destruction, not as jutsus to bring you fame. You will not be fighting for fame or glory, but for justice, because the police force are men and women of justice. Naruto took a moment to pause as he allowed his fresh students to absorb all that he'd said to them. This was one of the courses he taught in the academy. Introduction to UNPF. He also taught law, which was broken into 3 parts, which were all taught according to levels: taijutsu, basic fuinjutsu, and advanced Fuinjutsu. To those who showed deeper understanding of the art. Is there anyone with a question? Before I can continue, a hand was quickly raised. Naruto allowed for the question to be asked. It isn't exactly a question, the girl started, but sensei, can you tell the distinctive difference between shinobi and police? Not all shinobi are bad people. After all, admittedly, some shinobi possess high levels of humility, dignity, and morals. That is a fact that cannot be ignored, nor can we say because most of the shinobi lack morals, then all shinobi are evil. Nonetheless, the problem isn't whether shinobi are bad or not, it is the kind of world we live in. The problem is the shinobi rule and world. As a shinobi, your main objective is to protect your home village against everything, even family. Shinobi betray each other, kill for fame and money. However, there are shinobi who are good and will never betray anyone. The distinctive difference between police and shinobi is the mindset and reaction, as well as application. Whether you're good or bad, when you see an enemy, you take out your weapon, prepare a strategy, and ready your ninjutsu. Even when you're a good person, if you're fighting with a kunai, it will eventually kill someone. What is the reason for shooting an S-rank jutsu at your opponent? It isn't to kill. Why swing your sword when you don't want to kill anyone? Do you expect your opponent to dodge your swing or jutsu? What if he doesn't? Then it is death. When police see a suspect, the first reaction is engaging the person in a dialogue, reminding him of the crimes he's committed and laws broken. What happens when the suspect throws a jutsu, swings a sword at the police? Then one takes out a shield while another or more prepare the seal of restraint or engage the suspect in a police-style taijutsu. Our main objective when the suspect is in the clear is to restrain him or her. What if the suspect is too powerful for the police, and they can't restrain him before that scenario even occurs? You must know this. The police force will never pursue a suspect without knowing what he/she is capable of. When the capabilities are taken into account, the squad that will be sent will be the one strong enough to deal with the suspect's power. To put it simply, should the suspect be an A-rank criminal, we send a squad of 3 A-rank policemen led by an S-rank or just another A-rank. That rules out the situation where the suspect will be too powerful for the police force. However, should backup be required, a call can made, and in less than a minute backup will be brought no matter the location. How? Another student asked. You'll have to be in the police force to know that, Naruto said with a smile. An alarm rang. Oh well, that is the end of the period. I will see you in an hour for introduction to law. As the students hurried out of the class heading for Shizen's lessons, Naruto settled back to the edge of his desk. He really needed someone to fill in up in all these. He couldn't keep the academy running by himself. The only reason he even taught the subjects he taught was because there wasn't anyone who understood the UN's law and the functions of the police force better than him. From next week, he would have to do with clones and hire some teachers. He'd already completed the teachers' manual for all modules he taught. Even if one didn't have a better understanding of the law than him, they could teach using the manuals and guides provided for them. The manuals were all still in notes form, though he would have to get his clones to put them together and send them for printout. Each student was also to have a copy of the UN's constitution. The police force already had it. Sensei of very Hyuga Hanabi started as she walked into his class. Konohamaru behind her. Where are the others? Held up in Takada Sensei's training ground. Since we're advanced in that level, he freed us and said he wanted to keep on training the others to make them ready physically. Hanabi responded. Naruto became thoughtful for a few moments. I will have to form another schedule and hire a he-master for the academy for these kind of things. He needed to release some of the work he did. What are we going to do today? And I-san, Konohamaru asked a bit excitedly. Hunting. Both Konohamaru and Hanabi repeated in question. We are going to the forest and you will catch a very nasty animal without killing it. That isn't to say it won't try to kill you. What kind of animal are talking about? Hanabi didn't feel comfortable with how he had said nasty animal. There were some serious wild animals in the forest surrounding the village, probably filled in when no human was inhabiting the island. And why an animal? Its practice runs for when you're admitted to the ranks of the police force, and we can't exactly send civilian farmers to the other side of the island while the forest is filled with things that will probably eat them. Why don't you just create a wall around the forest? That seemed the easiest option. We need to reduce the numbers first. If we just fence them, we will reduce the hunting grounds, so to accommodate the space reduction we will have to reduce the animals. Besides the animals we're going to hunt, are the ones needed for your meat. Do you think I have the money to buy all the students' meat every day as well as pay for your caretakers? So the cheap method is to hunt food for yourself. Do you go fishing as well? Anabi asked Iwagakure. I was really surprised when you sent a message to me. I hadn't thought that you would be willing to talk to me so soon given your differences with me, Naruto said as he sat down in front of Kuratsuchi's desk. The message had come to him a few days ago, but his responsibilities didn't permit him to come earlier or quickly after the message requesting his presence in Iwagakure arrived. Nevertheless, he was here at this day. Naruto wasn't too afraid that it may have been a planned ambush that the woman had set up when she called him. If you wanted to talk to someone, you called them and went to them, wasn't it? But he understood that the woman couldn't afford to leave the village in such a nervy state. Her presence was required at all times. Another reason that made him think once about honoring Kuratsuchi's call was that the woman had kept true to her word and had removed him from Iwa's bingo book, which had pleased him greatly. The previous matter that had seen him come all the way to this village had been solved as well. Kuratsuchi glanced in all corners of her office trying to see if someone was eavesdropping but found nothing. Her gaze went straight to the blonde before her. Conversations with him were always taxing. Felt like each dialogue and monologue that went on between was a heavy right hook and a chop to her shoulder joints. The will and desire to see throughout fueled her inner strength to get this done. Before her voice sounded within Naruto's ears, the conversations she had with her grandfather sounded like an echo at the back of her head. There were so many cases that he had spoken to her about being calm and rational, thinking of what was best for the village. He wasn't here anymore. She couldn't tease him anymore about his age and back pain problems. That stubborn senile look was forever gone, and she had remained sitting on the very chair his little behind took comfort. She wasn't just the granddaughter of the Sandaime Tsuchikage, she was the Yondaime Tsuchikage, fourth leader of the village hidden in rocks, one of the great 5 nations. The standing meant little these days, though what mattered was being a member of the United Nations Alliance. But Kuratsuchi wasn't planning on joining of those anytime soon. Before the whole Amigakure incident, my grandfather was against the idea of revenge against your father's actions during the Third Shinobi World War I. Didn't understand back then, but my grandfather said the Yondaime Hokage couldn't be blamed because it was war after all. In battle it is either both sides will lose something or the winner wins all and the loser loses all. He would always say something like that to me. I didn't understand. I didn't want to understand. Things didn't better when you killed my men. You said the fate of my men was my responsibility, but I refused to accept responsibility for their deaths. Blamed you for it, ergo forsaking my responsibility as the one brought them out to the battlefield. They were just soldiers following orders. My grandfather and I were responsible for their deaths, but neither of us wanted to accept it. People change for the best or worst. This is a fact that Naruto has had to accept in his life. The notion that people can change in their mindset is what led to the belief that the shinobi world could be changed. People made the world, and if people could change, the world had to change as well. Naturally, there were those people who seemed like they would never change, but one had to hope. Kuratsuchi wasn't stupid, nor was she blind. He had known her the moment he studied her. Her grandfather had made her front runner to succeed him as Tsuchikage for a reason. Death isn't easy to accept, Kuratsuchi. When your men die, you find it hard to accept it. If you had accepted responsibility, it would mean seeing no crime in me, but you didn't want that. You wanted to blame me. You want to hate me. The incident renewed you resolved to seeing me dead. You had your own reasons, but you must have realized it, didn't you? When you focused on me, you neglected the fact you didn't lose a family member or friend, but other people did. The fourth rock shadow nodded slowly. I rallied behind them in support for your death, but I failed to at least try to understand that they were pained much more than I was. They had lost their loved ones, and I had only lost my army. There's a big difference there. I can always replace an army, but you can't replace a husband, a wife, child, or a sibling. You can't. The main thing is that we see the way. If you hadn't realized the truth, you wouldn't have called me here. It does little for the pain in the heart, nor does it fill the gap, but it means much more for you as leader. Kuratsuchi's black eyes stared at the opposite blue. He was being less rude to her than he usually was. No insults, but only gentle words and a smile that almost comforted her. She refused to take comfort from him. Nonetheless, it does, she agreed with his point. Rushing back at the back of her mind for a quick glance on what was going on, Kuratsuchi settled for a few moments of a soundless silence before spoke again. I called you here because I wanted you to know that I understand. I would have done the same thing as you did. However, that doesn't mean that I forgive you, but I understand. The understanding makes it tolerable for me to stand your presence without any bloody images. I don't want us to be enemies, but not friends either. I can accept that, Kuratsuchi, Naruto said with a smile.